This is Judge Judah, the show where we pit science and religion against each other in a court of law. I am your host, Judge Judah, the brother of Jesus Christ. Welcome to the show. I'm very grouchy here, so let's get started, eh? The plaintiff today is a YouTuber named Tupacalypse. Apocalypse? That's clever. Alright, what's your problem?
The pyramids of Egypt were giant power plants generating electricity.
Oh, for f***'s sake.
A careful examination of Egyptian history immediately reveals the sophistication in perfect illumination. No soot has been found in the corridors of the pyramids or the tombs of the kings, because these areas were lit using electricity.
Alright. Well, that is kinda interesting. So, ancient aliens debunked as the defendant. Do you have any evidence to counter this assertion about the lack of soot?
It's hard to know why they're saying this because there is black soot in almost every Egyptian temple and tomb. In fact, a recent ceiling cleaning conducted at the Temple of Hathor, which is the same temple where the so-called light bulb relief is found, they uncovered a brightly colored ancient ceiling painting that had never before been noticed. What was covering it up, you ask? I will quote them directly. They said that the ceiling was covered with, quote, hundreds of years of black soot. That's kind of funny, you have to admit.
Yeah, that is pretty funny. Tupacalypse, you got anything else here? Or are we finished early today?
Electricity was efficiently generated and widely utilized in ancient Egypt. No soot has been found in the corridors of the pyramids or the tombs of the kings, because these areas were lit using electricity.
Archaeologist and pyramid expert John Romer, quote, most of the pyramids, of course, were built in sunlight, so lighting the interior would only have been a problem after the roof went on. They would have used lamps with salt in the oil so the flame burns very pure, end quote. Romer isn't just guessing about the olive oil lamps. These lamps were depicted in Egyptian reliefs, and there are even receipts for orders of their wicks and other such evidence.
Alright, you have some receipts for lamps and wicks?
Maybe they were trying to save on their electric bill.
Hey! No! No!
So for what purpose did the Egyptians use electricity? Relief carvings clearly show that the Egyptians used handheld bulb-type lamps powered by a cable-free electric source.
Oh, that does kinda look like a couple of light bulbs Mr. AA debunked. What's your explanation of this?
This relief is not so mystical if you have a little understanding of Egyptian art and religious symbols. This is a variant depiction of the creation of the world in Egyptian mythology. The Egyptians believed that before anything else existed, there was a vast primordial sea of nothingness. They believed that the first thing to emerge from this sea was a lotus flower. It was believed that the lotus flower then gave birth to the first god, who was often associated with the sun. Atum, the god who created everything else after this point, is actually represented by a snake. And yes, it is a snake in these reliefs, not light bulb filaments. You can actually see the eyes and other elements of a snake if you look closely.
Oh yeah, huh?
This is pretty standard Egyptian mythology, that the lotus flower came forth first, and then the first god Atum, who was represented by a snake.
Well, okay. What about that bubble surrounding it?
Well, what about this bubble surrounding it? I will quote an expert directly on this point. Quote, despite the variety of deities, the Egyptians conceived the origin of the world as singular. Only one god, Atum, was responsible for the emergence of the universe as a bubble of air in the vast, limitless, inert ocean and everlasting darkness of the undifferentiated primordial waters, none, that existed before creation. In other words, the universe came forth from the lotus in a bubble of air.
Oh, well that makes sense, eh, Mr. Tupacs?
At the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, Tesla transmitted alternating electric current through his body to light a bulb he held in his hand without using electric cables. These bulbs are reminiscent of Nikola Tesla's descriptions to show that his alternating current was safe.
This is pretty standard Egyptian mythology, that the lotus flower came forth first, and then the first god Atum, who was represented by a snake. In other words, the universe came forth from the lotus in a bubble of air. The other elements of this picture back this interpretation up. The universal bubble is here being supported or raised up by the goddess Nun. This pose of outstretched hands is one of the more common motifs for Nun, and she raises and supports the universe from nothingness. In some versions of the story, the sun god represented in these scenes is Khepri, who is represented as a scarab beetle. Atum and Khepri sort of traded off being aspects of Ra in Egyptian mythology. So in essence, in more common versions of this scene, you have Nun, the primordial waters, lifting up the solar barge of Ra for its first journey across the sky. And this explains why the exact same poses are seen in this creation scene at Dendera. They are also depicting Nun raising up the universe out of her waters. This idea is very, very common. You can see other images of Ra emerging from the primordial lotus as well.
Ah, thank you, Mr. Ancient Aliens Debunked. You have presented a coherent argument against the claims of Mr. Tupac and Nikola Tesla's old-timey Egyptian light bulbs here. Mr. Apocalypse, anything else you would like to say?
The electromagnetic technology used in Tesla's famous tower is identical to the electromagnetic field set up in the construction of the pyramids. Both systems generate negative ions and transmit them without the need for electric cables.
Right. Of course, there's nothing in any text or on any wall that would back up anything that he just said, and the so-called light bulb pictures are easily explained using standard Egyptian symbolism.
All right, that sounds pretty logical to me, and is a much more likely explanation than the ancient Egyptians using pyramid ions and f***ing snake bulbs or whatever.
The pyramids' underground chambers are granite conductors built within the rock charged with physioelectricity.
Okay, the court finds in favor of the Ancient Aliens Debunked guy, who has come forth with a coherent and systematic defense which did not involve pulling fanciful nonsense out of his ass, huh?
The Egyptians also used electric power in their weaving plants.
What the? Alright, we're done. I've been Judge Judah. See you next time, and don't forget, get the f*** out of here! Right?